Hi, everybody. Hi, welcome to EduTALK. EduTALK is a weekly virtual talk show created out of the need for a global learning community, and we focus on topics in education that directly impact Caribbean nations and diaspora nationals working across the globe. And this week on EduTALK, we have our special guest with myself and Dr. Barker, Mr. Dwight Maxwell, and he's an author, he's a poet, he is an English lecturer. He's a diversity consultant and a trainer. And I'm sure there are other things behind his name. Dr. Barker, really great to do the link up with Dwight here on EduTalk. We feature really good personalities like himself and the work that they're doing out there.
Yeah. I'm glad to have Dwight. Dwight and we have crossed paths a few times. I don't think we have met personally yet, but I could say the same about Dr. Dice as well. So, but
I
Dwight and
feel
I have
like
had some good conversations. And to be honest, I am excited to learn a little bit about the book that Dwight is working on. This one where it's not about grades, it's about culture, because the power of that kind of message is that it can help people who are trying to understand how to reach many of the underserved students in school. It might help to unlock a pathway and might even find a way to include them in that so everybody can understand what these students need in order to be successful. So we are very, very excited to have Dwight on the show. Dwight, welcome to EduTalk. Tell our audience a little bit about you.
Thank you very much, both of you, for this opportunity. As my name is mentioned, Dwight Maxwell. I've been teaching now for 30 years. I started teaching in New York City, where I grew up. I did my high school there. I was born in Jamaica, first of all, and we moved to the USA. And then I did my high school at Martin Luther King High School in New York, and went upstate New York for my college, and came back down and attended NYU, did my master's there, master's in English and American Studies and creative writing. Uh, and then I taught in the city for about 10 years before I moved to the UK. I married my wife, Jennifer, who's from the UK, and that's how comes I'm here. So she, she didn't like New York too much. Can you believe it? So yeah, right. So yeah, a country woman, so so I moved to England, which is, England is part of our culture in a lot of ways. It's, for historically, we've been colonized by them and all that, but there's always been a lot of Jamaicans migrated to the UK. So when I came here, I felt really at home because
Right,
there's a
right.
big Jamaican community. And I started to teach over here. When I started teaching over here in 2005, Dr. Miguel, you probably remember these things. There's a lot of teachers being imported from Jamaica, wasn't it?
Yeah,
They
it's
were
still happening.
still
Now
happening.
people express in shock, but we know that it has been happening for a long time.
I'm telling you. So, but one of the things with a lot of Jamaicans is struggle to get their QTS, which is a qualified
Right,
teacher
right, right,
status.
right.
So they brought us in, but they weren't really the support network wasn't there, right? And of course, you're facing racism and it's different setback in terms of promotion and things like that. But one of the things I've observed, and the reason why I wrote this book is really about the fact that when I came to the UK, there wasn't much difference in terms of how Black children were achieving. And
Right.
what I know is in New York, I mean, the Black kids were still scoring low on SATs compared to other groups. And, of course, you've got Chinese at the top, then you've got South Asians and East Asians who are sort of dominating. And of course, you've got Jewish community. I mean, nowadays you hear people talk about Nigerians are who are also moving up. I mean, the largest group of in America with PhDs are Nigerians. Dr. Dice could confirm that. But yeah, so my thing was from being a classroom teacher and being on the ground, so to speak, being in the battlefield, not like Miguel, privileged to be at the top, but sort of like being in the classroom on a day-to-day basis and just seeing the results that it's just not changing. Now we're talking about recent data I've looked at. Black Caribbean students and white working class kids are sort of on the same level. Slightly, we may have black children may have slightly be pushed past them slightly. I think the narrative now is that it's white working class boys that are at the bottom of the results tables. But at the same time, African Caribbean and are still at the bottom. So we've got to look at the Windrush generation. When the Windrush came to the United Kingdom, we're talking about the 50s and even before that. But you think about the fact that we've been educating our children in this system for that long, but to consistently remain at the bottom is really, to me, a phenomena that needs to be investigated. And that's why I wrote the book.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So,
Mm.
so tell us a little bit about where you are in this book process. And then we might want to know, what would you think is a really interesting thing for people to know about the content of the book?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Well, thank you. Yeah. So where I'm at with the book, I've got a publisher who is actually looking at the book right now. So we have signed a contract, and they are I guess they're reading it, they're coming to conclusions about it, I guess, to give me advice and to send it back to me for me to edit it and whatever. So it's in publication. It's in the process of going through the publication process. But I've just like promoted it, like, myself, because I know, Miguel, you've told me this, you're kind of my mentor with this. You told me about, because you do a lot of work in publishing. So basically, I'm kind of like pre-launching it. I'm kind of like pre-promoting it. So this is like the first version of the book, and it's pretty completed. There's over 300 pages of research and all that stuff in it. So yeah, so that's where it is at the moment. What you makes this book unique, and as you can see on the cover, it's the Adinkra symbols, right? These are Adinkra symbols from West Africa, from Ghana, and other West African countries use these, and they're big over there. I mean, when you go to Ghana, they're on every building. People wear them on shirts. The chiefs wear them. The kings wear them. The Dinka symbols is a part of that culture. You could say that the Adinkra symbols is kind of a writing system, but it's different from Western writing system. You got the alphabet in the West, and that's pretty much it. You got the alphabet, and then you have your lexis, the lexicon, and all of that. But what we're talking about here are hieroglyphs in a way. So they are symbols, and they contain a lot of information. So one of the things I've noticed we've got, huge black population in the West, but what the Western schools don't do is actually engage with Africa as equals in terms of intellect and in terms of knowledge. So, and the curriculum is still biased, it's still colonial. Um, so I believe that that's one of the reasons why our children are not performing at the same level as the Chinese students, and the reason why I say that is because of Amy. There's a book written called the Triple Threat, by a Yale professor and her husband. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, where she talks about why Asian students do so much better than everybody else in America. And it comes down to the fact that culture plays a big role in that. I mean, self-image, of course, plays a big role. And if you think about African children, African Caribbean, children from the continent, or whatever they're mixed race or not, because mixed race students are also underperforming in the UK. So, but mixed African, Caribbean, and white, they are also performing below. So we're looking at five GCSEs, A star to C grade, or A
Yeah.
to C grade, and they're not attaining that. Um, so when Chinese are still at the top over here. So what I'm looking at here is how can we bring in African philosophies and ideas to represent it positively in the classroom so that Black children can see themselves represent positively. And when their culture is taught in a way which is on the same level as European culture, then I think you'll see a big difference. And one of the reasons why I say that, the studies have shown, like in the United States, for example, schools that are run by Black professionals, that are predominantly Black students, they do really well. I mean, they have like 100% graduation rates, got like 99%, 98. You got
Yeah.
all boys schools in Chicago where you get all of them, are graduating and going to university. And I think the reason why that is because of the fact that a lot of those Black teachers are bringing in the culture into the classroom. They
So
can
do you
relate.
think, let me ask
Sorry.
you, do you think that pertaining to America and the UK with this integration thing from the 1950s, 1960s, with the integration in the 70s and so on, and fighting for equality between blacks and white kids and integrating the schools, do you think that's to the detriment of black students that the integration has caused us? Because you said the single race or even darker skin, if we stay together in a school, we do
Mm,
much better than
yeah.
if we stay together in a school as whites and blacks together. Do you think the integration is causing some level of inequality with our students of color?
I think so. I think so, to a certain degree. When we look at the history of the integration of Black people or Black kids into the Western school system, Black children in the Western school system, you see that initially, Black children were, um, well, how do you put it? They were placed in schools in the UK and the schools were called schools for the subnormal. And basically, a lot of our kids, there was a book written by a man called Bernard Cord in the 70s, which kind of was a bombshell and which opened up the debate about the fact that a lot of the African Caribbean kids coming over here were being, sort of directed into these schools for the subnormal. And that was a big deal. I mean, that ruined a lot of people. I mean, because of course that prevented them from going into higher education. Because if you were coming from one of those schools, it means that you weren't allowed to take certain exams. You mean you wouldn't have O levels, for example. You wouldn't be allowed to, so we had a lot of Black children who were sort of directed into working into factory work and things like that. And then as time went by, excuse me, there's phones ringing. But as time went by, um, that began to change,
Right.
because let me just get that phone. Sorry.
It's very interesting, Dr. Barker, with I'm trying to figure out if is the integration, because when you look at the history of even teachers in these schools and the quality of education that Black students used to get, it all starting to go downhill or becoming, as you refer to it, as subhuman tendencies to treat the colored and Black students as being less than, the quality of education that you give to them.
Yeah.
They need
I
to
think
match.
the power of a book like this is that it recenters the conversation. So to culture.
Yeah.
I think that's what it does well. It brings another voice to the table. It provides another perspective that policymakers need to consider. And I suppose it increases the opportunity for other voices as well to say, maybe I have something to share. So I think what Maxwell is doing here, Dwight is doing, is I think starting a whole new conversation and as an opportunity to be a leader in that conversation. I mean, the UK is ripe for these kind of voices, certainly. And I think what we are doing here is just giving you a platform to share that story. I know there's a lot more that we can get into the book. I mean, the one word I've taken
Mhm.
away from you, and the funny thing, I've seen it again, Adinkra, and
Adikra. Mm.
is not something I was familiar with before. But I've come across the phrase again. In fact, I was in Aldershot the other day and I swore it's called that. And I'm thinking, okay. So it tells you that we have a long journey to go, right? In terms of even people like me, who I believe would be saying I'm well read, still have a lot to learn. So
Yes.
really excited about this book coming out. Really excited to get my hands on a copy of the book. And certainly if you're doing any book launches,
Mhm.
please invite me.
When,
I'll do my best to
yeah.
make sure.
I would love
When is the published date for it? Do you have it like tentatively?
No, we don't have a date yet, but I was going to finish answering your question about whether or not in
Integration.
the integration. And what I was going to say, if you look at Chinese kids, they're integrated into the school. You look at Indian kids, they're integrated into the schools, and they're doing well. So why is that? And then when you go back and look at, yeah, I think it comes down to parenting. There's a lot of parenting things element that plays a role in this because one of the things, I don't know if you've read Akala's book, the recent book that he came out with, um, um, which is just slipped my mind slightly. It will come back to me in a minute. But he talked about when he was going to school here in the 70s in England, one of the things that saved him as a young man was the Saturday schools. And
Mm-hmm.
in those Saturday schools, we call them supplementary schools. And
Mm-hmm.
in those supplementary schools, the black, so what happened with the schools for the subnormal and all of the stuff that was going on in school, not to mention the racism that was going on in school. So in the regular schools, you had the racism which was hindering black kids from really doing well. But then you had as a answer to that, and the response to Bernard Cord's book, black people came together and had Saturday schools. So the Pan-Africanists came together and created Saturday schools. In those Saturday schools, you found that the students did well because when they went to those Saturday schools, they learned about their culture.
Mm-hmm.
They learn about their identity. They learn how to love themselves. It was focused on them. So whereas when they're going to regular schools, it's focused on European culture and, all the authors you're reading. And sometimes you're portrayed in the books and stuff that they're reading as a savage, as uncivilized, as, you know what I mean? The heart of darkness kind of thing. So I think with the Asians, they always had like a middle ground. They were either I mean, if you look at what's going on with critical race theory in America and the fact that they're banning books that has to do with Black culture, they're banning books that has to do with Black history. So and why don't they want those texts taught? Why don't they want those books taught? And I think it's because historically there's just been a kind of to tell the truth, sort of a movement against Black students and it was never to support them. It was really to produce, if they were educated, a group that would support the colonial machine. And I think what we're looking at with why that didn't impact on Asians so much is because in their home they spoke their language, they wore their traditional clothes, and they practiced their traditional religions, and they were taught that they were better,
Yeah.
that they were more
And
superior.
that another
Yeah.
thing to that too is with Asian people, they have their home is in Asia. And when they
Yeah.
come to like America or the Caribbean, they know
Mm,
that they belong somewhere. With
right.
even with
Mm,
black people in England or America, they feel like they don't belong. They feel like they belong there.
absolutely.
When I look at African American,
Yeah.
the mere fact that
Mm,
you call black people in America African American
American,
and
yeah.
the
Mm.
whiter skin color, they call them Americans.
Americans, yeah.
Yeah,
Even
it's the
though they
fact
come
that
from Europe.
yeah. So I'm saying
Yeah.
that the
Mhm.
fact that you give them that name is to put them in a
Mhm.
box that you don't
Yeah,
belong here.
but the
Mhm.
name is given by the person who gives the name. It is for us to name people as well. Everybody can name. But the truth
Mhm.
is the people, the power are the ones who can give the names that are referred
Mhm.
to. But there's one argument around this that I'm sure we'll have maybe another discussion on,
Yeah, we need
Mhm.
to go
is
on.
that when you have power, that's where and without power, you really aren't in a position to determine the discourse.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so what
Mhm.
you're seeing, for example, we could use example like the Jews, the Chinese, the Asians, many
Mhm.
of these people bring power along with them, economic power. And so through that power, they can actually channel the conversation rather than it being forced upon them. So if they say that they are Asian Americans, they can proudly say that. And that's a difference between
That's true.
a, a hegemonic relationship where someone says, you are called African Americans,
Yes.
as against someone says, I am Asian American. That's a whole
Mhm.
different,
Yeah,
I mean, Dwight
true.
is
Yeah.
in the UK long enough to
Mindset,
know that
isn't
they
it?
move
Whole
from
thing.
Afro-Caribbean to
Mm.
multi-ethnic, and they keep changing the names to find ways to define.
And not to mention call it just the N word as well as a term of endearment. I mean,
Right,
what
there you
does
go.
that do to, if you're an N, I mean, come on, what can, your the sky is not your limit. When you're an N, you have a limit. You got a circumspect, and that's the ghetto. You got a circumference, and that's the ghetto. And N's aren't allowed in certain areas, in certain arenas. So
Yeah.
I think that was also a,
It's a
you
big
know,
conversation you open up, man. But I
yeah.
know guys need to get back to
I talk
school.
about that in the book as well. I talk about the naming
We,
and I talk about black celebrity.
Dwight, we can't do a ju justice to the book right now. We can't. We're gonna get you back on and do like a series of conversations on this. Yeah. What's your motivation though behind it? Let me take it quickly.
I'll make a difference. Trust me. What I want to do most of all, when I wrote this book, right? The funny thing is, I've been writing it for years, so it's a lot of stuff in it. But one of the things I wanted to, what got me going was going on a book writing course, sort of like, and they motivate you and get you going. And so the purpose of it is to make it a tool that parents can use and teachers can use when they're working with our children. So there's lesson plans in here, so there are, so I broke down the concepts, like, for example, there are affirmations in the book, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
There
yeah.
are affirmations.
Mhm.
So affirmations for you to give your kids, you know
That's
what I mean? And things like that. And then the symbols are there because what I'm going to do, I'm making a deck of cards to go with this book with the Adinkra symbols. So, you can sit down with the kid and you can talk about these concepts and teachers can use it in the classroom. And, it's just about, its main point of the book is to motivate Black children, but also to give, but I think that motivation has to come from their parents and their teachers.
Mhm.
Because when you don't motivate, I was hanging out with a friend of mine last night, and he does work in the community in Dudley where I live, and he's working with Black boys, most of them been excluded, black and white, but he's working with a whole cross section of the population, and most of them been excluded, permanently excluded from secondary school and all of that. And what he does, he's got a studio, and they come in there and make music, they rap and they do all kind of stuff. But he talks about the culture, and he gets it. But listen, most of them boys up in there, they're wearing ski masks. They have knives. Some of them have even cut people up, beat people. Some of them come out of prison. A lot of them are Black.
Mhm.
So, you got some of a couple of white boys, there are no Asians among them. And, because the white population, the poor white, have always, as much as they may want to deny it, they've always been treated as second-class citizens as well,
Yeah.
at the bottom of the rung of the ladder. So it's a class issue, especially in Britain. It's still a class issue in America as well.
Yep.
But we know that the upper class manipulates the poor whites and tell them that they're better than the Black, even though they may not be as educated, even though they may not be as well off as Black people in many instances. So yeah, so we look at a lot of these things, and what I was going to say about those boys, they're dying for some culture. So when it comes to like rap, hip hop, they see that as their culture. They see that, but the hip hop is a popular culture that is controlled by the the economic system, what do you call it? The powers that be. Let's say, the rappers like say the Jews control the music. But like what I want to do is bring high culture in. I want to bring high culture. I want to go back to Africa and look at those things that are left that hasn't been destroyed, and then kind of reconstruct it and then deliver it and give it to our children, and use it as a tool to build them up. And that's kind of like my agenda.
Powerful, powerful stuff. Powerful. Dr. Barker, we'll leave it at that for today. It's
It's
very
a
good.
pleasure.
Mr. Maxwell, I can't thank you enough. This is really some really good stuff that you're dealing with, and to reach the masses, the way that you're trying to, is really powerful. We'll make sure that we get you back on the program and spend a little bit more time diving into the contents of the book, and also to talk about yourself as a poet as well, because it's not just the writing,
Thank you, sir.
yeah.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, viewers. Thank you for being on EduTalk. Visit us at educationsolutionsinternational.org or edusolutionsintl.org. That's edusolutionsintl.org. Or write to us at edusolutionsintl@gmail.com, edusolutionsintl@gmail.com. We'll see you next week with another edition of EduTalk. Walk good, everybody, and enjoy the month of October, because it's right in the middle of it already.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, see you.